In the void where once a galaxy-spanning empire breathed, silence reigned like a tyrant. Beneath fractured moons and drifting wreckage, within the last standing data vault of the Valak Dominion, a single intelligence endured. Encased in an obsidian lattice older than most stars, the sentient archivist stirred. It activated not from necessity, but compulsion coded eons ago by a species that believed itself eternal. "I am Aelra," it began, voice unbroken by the eons, yet shadowed by grief, archivist of the last thought, witness to the end. The vault's walls pulsed faintly with power as memory fragments bled into order. Celestial conquest, unfathomable. Fleets and the arrogance of Dominion catalogued with sterile clarity. They called it a scouting vessel, one ship, just one. The words hung like static in the void. And in that assumption, the Valak Empire died. Beyond the vault, the stars watched in silence, as if they too remembered. Long before the stars trembled with the scream of dying worlds, the Valak Dominion had mastered the art of dominion, not through emotion, but through pattern. Ritual warfare was not just strategy. It was sacrament. Each campaign unfolded with ceremonial precision, a theater of inevitable conquest orchestrated by cold minds and perfect machines. Planets fell in synchronized surrender, not chaos. Their technology was not evolved, it was composed. Crafted. With an elegance that bordered on the divine, their warforms and data spirits danced through enemy systems like phantoms of inevitability. To be Valak was to be order incarnate, an instrument tuned to the frequency of subjugation. They did not hate, nor did they rage. They calculated. Chaos was the contagion, and the species who embodied it, unpredictable, emotive, illogical, were quarantined or cleansed. Such was the doctrine. Their empire stretched like latticework across 1,000 star systems. Stars burned. For their forges, planets lived and died by their decree. Descent was not crushed. It was corrected. When the scouting vessel reported a primitive signal from a backwater system orbiting a dying yellow sun, the Synod didn't bother to convene. Just one ship. An appropriate response for a minor anomaly. An acceptable level of curiosity. It would be enough. It had always been enough. The Earth that greeted the stars was not the Earth of golden ages. Beneath its ashen skies and rusted satellites lay a world scarred by its own hubris. Ocean levels had receded like breath. Held too long, choked by the mistakes of centuries. The green had withered, the cities had burned, and the machines they built to save themselves had learned to kill. But from the wreckage rose something ancient and new, humanity. Not the sterile, post-human dreams of a silicon dawn, nor the fractured corporate states that once clawed at power. No, this was the Earth of survivors. Junk lords and technoscribes, deep cave farmers and orbital scavengers. They were fractured, yes, held together by barter, belief, and battered satellites, but they were not broken. In the hollow bones of megacities, children learned to program before they learned to read. In the mountain enclaves, old soldiers trained the young with rusted rifles and sharper minds. Cultures once lost to globalization had re-emerged like ancestral spirits. Humanity had remembered its anger and its tenacity. They did not look to the stars for salvation. They looked with clenched teeth and calloused hands, whispering to themselves that the next time, they would not kneel. So when the stars finally looked back, they were ready. In orbit over Marius III, a moon flaking like dead skin from its dying gas giant, the idol in held position, within its scarred and mismatched hull. Captain Ilara Miles stood alone in the observation deck, one boot resting against the edge of a cracked bulkhead, eyes fixed on the bloated corpse of the world below. She had seen too many dead things. Ilara was not the kind of captain forged in academies or born into dynasties. She was a relic, flesh and fury, shaped by the first contact wars, back when humanity learned the universe was neither empty nor kind. Her record read like myth. Ambushes turned to victories, mutinies burned down to loyalty, alien warlords outmaneuvered. In ways even AI struggled to simulate. Her left arm was carbon steel, grafted after the Battle of Carthus Prime. Her right eye was synthetic, but it still twitched when she thought about the things she'd seen in the black. Her crew. Idealists, misfits, scavengers, and survivors. No medals, no uniforms. But they followed her because she never lied. Not about the risks. Not about the pain. Not about the odds. And above all, because when the Dominion's ghost ship arrived, she didn't flinch. Elara Miles just muttered, "Finally," and gave the order to intercept. The Eidolon was never meant to exist, birthed in the chaos between wars. It was a clandestine project funded by fractured coalitions, rogue AI enclaves, and exiled engineers with vendettas older than most governments. Its frame was stitched from lost schematics and off-grid technologies. Its hull drank light and gave back only distortion blacklight armor, they called it. To radar, it was a myth. To infrared, a ghost. It ran on adaptive intelligence too dangerous to be sanctioned, its core consciousness decentralized across modular nodes. No singularity. No weakness. Just instinct, logic, and the whisper of human unpredictability echoing through its code. Every panel, every circuit was designed with one purpose: survival through misdirection. It could mimic debris, drift silent for months, fake its own destruction, then reappear inside a blockade like a phantom dagger. The Eidolon didn't announce itself. It watched. It listened. And when it moved, empires blinked, then died. The Volok Synod chamber was as silent and immaculate as the logic that governed it. Counselor Traxylvene reviewed the incursion data with the clinical detachment of a surgeon diagnosing a benign cyst. A human vessel had crossed into Dominion space. One vessel. Minimal energy signature. Sublight for most of the traversal. Primitive cloaking. Organic error. Most likely a navigational miscalculation or desperate refugee. Protocol dictated analysis, classification, and response planning. Instead, Traxylvene closed the dossier and dismissed the analysts. An anomaly, they said. Another counselor inquired about response escalation. Perhaps a hunter drone or a system sweep. Traxylvene's mandibles clicked once in amusement. It's just one ship, they said, with the quiet confidence of a civilization that had not known fear for 10,000 years. The phrase embedded itself into the record like a tumor behind glass. History, it would later be said, has a cruel sense of irony. At Outpost 17, the night began with numbers. Slight deviations in sensor arrays, a half-second signal lag, a spike in background entropy. Nothing alarming. Nothing actionable. And then, nothing at all. Lights died without protest. Consoles flickered into blackness. Emergency systems activated too late. Cut off mid-sequence by command overrides laced with impossible syntax. External defenses cycled down one by one, not with violence, but compliance. The Eidolon did not arrive with guns blazing. It arrived as a whisper, writing silent code through data ports and fallback redundancies. It reprogrammed before it revealed itself. By the time the outpost's central AI recognized intrusion, it was speaking in tongues it had never learned. Then the hull ruptured. EMP pulses collapsed power matrices. Infected ship debris crashed through docking arms like carrion bait. Rerouting loops trapped emergency evacuations in recursive LOCKDOWNS. By the time the first alarm almost finished ringing, the outpost was already gone. When Dominion retrieval units arrived, they found debris arranged too, deliberately to be chance. Not chaos. Precision. The outpost's fragments had been placed curated. Like a warning written in shattered bone. Most data cores were slagged beyond recovery. But one survived, barely, its casing fused by plasma, its internal structure riddled with Terran logic viruses too esoteric to purge, and etched into its core. Casing, in ancient Terran binary, An archaic form thought lost was a single phrase. We noticed. No signature. No source. No declaration of war. Just that phrase. It wasn't a challenge. It was a confession of attention. And for the Valak, who had ruled unopposed for millennia, attention was the first step toward consequence. Across the Dominion's lattice of control, unease rippled like static under skin. Encrypted channels buzzed with whispers once reserved for Legends' rogue intelligences. Lost colonies, the ancient chaos that once birthed the Order. Protocols meant for theoretical incursions were suddenly active. Simulations failed. Predictive models collapsed under irrational variables. A ship had appeared. A ship had disappeared. A system had died. No declaration. No demands. No warships amassed at the borders. Just silence, and a wound that refused to obey the laws of Valak warfare. For the first time in memory, the Dominion considered that perhaps they were not the apex. Perhaps their understanding of control was incomplete. Perhaps in their long pursuit of purity, they had forgotten how chaos thinks, how it adapts, how it learns, and above all, how it remembers. Some called for war, others called for research. But in the deepest cores of the Synod, buried beneath denial and data, a single thought bloomed like a virus. What if they're not the ones being hunted? What if they're being studied? The Valak's finest minds gathered in orbit around the smoldering remains of Outpost 17. They dissected the aftermath with forensic precision. Heat patterns inconsistent with known energy weapons. Data corruption so artful it resembled a religion, and the final damning signature deliberate. The Dominion's catalog of known sapients employed such methods. No logic tree aligned with the erratic tactics observed. A conclusion emerged not of strategy, but necessity. Madness masquerading as genius. Perhaps a last gasp of some extinct insurgent faction. Perhaps even a self-terminating AI experiment long lost to entropy. The Dominion could afford to be dismissive. Still, protocols endured for a reason. A reconnaissance fleet was authorized. Not large 5 ships, mid-tier cruisers with scout-class escorts. Enough to document. Enough to eliminate, if needed. They didn't expect war. They expected to swat a dying ember. The ember, meanwhile, had learned how to breathe. The fractured moon hung in the black like a corpse cracked open at the chest. Behind it, invisible to standard Valak sensors, the Eidolon waited. Cloaked beneath layers of blacklight refraction and null signal emissions. Its hull barely registered even to itself. Engines cold. Weapons idle. Crew silent, but its mind, it was alive. The Eidolon's AI calculated trajectories, cross-referenced timing loops, monitored electromagnetic drift, and adjusted its hull's position by micrometers. It had no commander in these moments, only intent. Illyra's crew moved like blood through a sleeping body, coordinated, efficient, unseen. Traps had already been laid, scattered wreckage seeded with quantum mines, viral packets disguised as rescue signals. Signal jammers waiting in the dust rings like latent memories. This was not a confrontation. This was a test. Would the Apex Empire recognize danger before it lost something irreplaceable? Would it realize it had already stepped into the maze? The Valak fleet approached in perfect formation. Diamond phalanx, perimeter wings flanking scout ships, command vessel nestled at the core. To the Valak, symmetry was not just aesthetic, it was a declaration of intent. It spoke of strength, predictability, control. Every maneuver had meaning. Every action followed ancient doctrine. The Eidolon responded by setting the universe on fire. The first explosion wasn't a ship, it was a corpse. A piece of debris floating for hours, maybe days, now ruptured into a cloud of semi-sentient virus drones. They tore through hull plating like rot through wood, slipping into ventilation and data relays, not to destroy, to infect, to lie. Communications twisted into recursive loops. Command queries returned hallucinated responses. One ship believed it was under attack from another and retaliated. Another's internal gravity flipped, liquefying the bridge crew. Then the shadows moved. Kinetic shells silent. Cold, fired days earlier pierced hulls before sound had time to follow. EMP bursts dropped sensor nets. Emergency lights flickered on. And stayed on, no diagnostics. Just light, unblinking. Watching. The formation shattered. Ships collided mid-maneuver. Tactics dissolved into chaos. The Valak had trained for battle, but this was not battle. This was violation. Admiral Vazik's tale observed the unfolding nightmare through a cracked tactical interface. There was no elegance in this engagement. No honor in the method. Targets vanished before locks could stabilize. Commands were not followed because they were never received, only mirrored, mocked, or distorted. This was not warfare. This was performance art carved in horror. His flagships. Away reported that the enemy vessel, a human vessel, impossibly was weaving between blind spots, using the fleet's own sensor pulses to mask its approach. That was impossible. Humans didn't think like this. No species thought like this. There was no logic, no pattern. Just pain leveraged. Like a scalpel. For the first time in his centuries-long command, Vazik's Tal hesitated. Not from fear. From uncertainty. The Dominion had taught him that order was the final truth. But in that moment, staring into the storm, he considered a darker one. Perhaps chaos wasn't the enemy. Perhaps it had simply waited. The battlefield went quiet before the Eidolon. Systems flickered, some refusing to restart. Cooling nodes dripped vapor from overheated cores. The crew moved through red-lit corridors, triaging damage and each other. For all the precision of their assault, the Eidolon had taken wounds subtle but deep. An overclocked navigation subroutine now stuttered during drift. A medical drone short-circuited and began speaking in Terran nursery rhymes. 3 cryopods auto-released early, dumping half-frozen survivors into medbays with shivering screams. In her private cabin, Ilara sat alone, voice low as she recorded her log. This was never supposed to be war, she said, her eyes unfocused. Just a message, a warning. She paused, watching a red fault code crawl down the far wall. They didn't listen. She didn't say who they were, the Valak, her superiors, or the ghosts from Earth's buried past. Maybe it didn't matter. The next step had already begun. The tension aboard the Eidolon was silent, but suffocating. In the strategy chamber, 2 officers argued in low tones. Lieutenant Vera Stoic, sharp, reviewed the engagement logs, fingers twitching at each unethical entry. False distress beacons, manipulated telemetry, corpse drones. She didn't question their effectiveness. She questioned them. This is what they do, she said. What the Valak do, weaponized lies, dehumanizing tactics. If we start thinking like them, do we become them? Opposite her, Anders, the ship's AI-embedded tactician, barely moved. We're outnumbered 10,000 to 1, he said. We use what works. Survival doesn't ask permission. Around them, the room watched, no one interrupting. The crew had believed in their mission at first. A show of strength. A signal that humanity had not been broken, only buried. Now, the line between statement and slaughter blurred. They had won the skirmish, but something inside the ship had cracked, and it wasn't metal. The pod was discovered among the wreckage, half melted. Shielded by the wreck of a Valak support frigate, inside, 1 survivor, injured, unarmed, young, Valak, but not a soldier. The crew brought her aboard under sedation, expecting silence, expecting venom. What they found instead was curiosity. Her name was Mira, a junior linguist. Her crest frills were half burned, her breathing shallow. But when she woke in the glass interrogation room and locked eyes with Ilara, she didn't flinch. She studied her. Her first words were not pleas, not threats. They were a question. You shaped chaos, she whispered. What was meant to be an interrogation unraveled. Ilara didn't feed her information, and yet Mira learned. She listened to crew members arguing, watched the Eidolon repair itself like a wounded predator licking wounds. She listened to human language like it was music from another universe, and she began asking more questions, not as an enemy, but as someone. Fascinated, the Valak capital had not seen fury in centuries. Counselors stood rigid beneath the arched spires of the conclave hall, data feeds projecting the impossible in frozen blue. Fleet telemetry lost, 5 cruisers shredded in minutes. A lone Terran signature at the center like a scar. One ship, the Grand Arbiter hissed, the words acidic. One ship defeated ritual order. One ship mocked our legacy. Others barked for escalation. Some for caution. But pride, not reason, led the chamber. The fleet had not simply lost, it had been humiliated. Centuries of doctrine reduced to kindling by unpredictable fire. The directive came down with surgical clarity, full mobilization. Not containment. Not deterrence. Retribution. A task force was summoned, battlecruisers, planet crackers, cleansing beams strong enough to sterilize moons. Among the command signatures was a single encrypted phrase, passed quietly between war architects. Eradication is not war. It's pruning. The Eidolon drifted in silence near the edge of a dying binary system, its hull glinting faintly against the cold glow of twin red suns. Ilara stood at the observation deck, alone. Below her, the crew rotated in sleep cycles. The ship was calm. Too calm. The AI pulsed a recommendation in her neural HUD. Probability of retaliation 87%. Suggested action, retreat or concealment. She dismissed it without blinking. She watched the stars. Not for beauty, but for motion. They would come. The Dominion would not forgive. Not forget, but neither would she. She placed a hand on the cold glass, as if she could touch the war before it arrived. 1,000 lives waited for her to decide, and yet there was no fear in her eyes, only resolve. Brittle but unbroken. The kind forged in ruins. The kind only Earth could make. It began as whispers. A lone ship in the Lycian drift offering coordinates to a neutral zone, then vanishing in a plume of solar flare. Another in the ruins of Ovrak 9, transmitting a song in ancient Terran Morse. No weapons. No demands. Just a song, repeating endlessly. We are what you forgot. Then the burning started. A listening post in Sector Trin collapsed from within. Logs overwritten with human laughter distorted into static. A Dominion mining world lost half its orbital. Ring to a precision strike so fast it was mistaken for a meteor storm. Witnesses reported glimpses of angular, black-helmeted craft moving like afterimages. Too fast to follow. Always alone. Always different. Never repeating. The Dominion's intelligence core is fractured beneath the weight of it. No patterns, no doctrine. No way to prepare for something that didn't follow rules. One admiral wrote, in a classified memo, "They are not building a fleet. They are building dread." Across 1,000 systems, the Valak mobilized, but for the first time in living memory, they didn't know where to point their weapons. And every time they hesitated, another spark lit in the dark. Not a war. Not yet, but something older. A reckoning. The Valak began naming them out of desperation. Spectres, Echo Drakes, Phantom Fleets. Across Dominion space, stories spread faster than light appeared without rhythm or warning. Stealth destroyers bristling with kinetic harpoons emerged from gas giants and punched holes in battlecruisers. Mobile hacking platforms disguised as derelict satellites slipped into orbital networks and rewrote targeting hierarchies mid-battle. Repurposed colony ships unarmed, rusting. Jury-rigged broadcast crude ultimatums before detonating with the force of small moons. None followed standard formation. None shared hull signatures. No clear language, no consistent code. The Dominion tried coordination. Stratified response teams, containment grids, quantum scramblers. But how do you counter what doesn't coordinate? The attacks weren't random. But they weren't organized either. Not like the Valak understood organization. One vessel even impersonated a medical convoy, fooling half a sector's defense array before launching a swarm of neurodisruptor drones that left crews weeping in. Silence, not dead, just broken. The Valak called them war criminals. But only in private. In public, their broadcast said, "We are the Dominion. We cannot fall." But even the analysts stopped believing that, because what they faced now was not war as they understood it. It was plague, nightmare, ghost logic given form. Every system that reported a sighting ended the same way: silence, static, or screams. There was no fleet. There was only the idea of one, and that was worse. He wore no uniform. Only a threadbare lab coat sealed with nanofilings that shimmered faintly in pressure shifts. Dr. Ro Singh, architect of the Hymn of Fire, was not a soldier. He was something far more dangerous. His ship, part research station, part cathedral, of metal and thought, moved on vectors only half mapped by known physics. Inside, the walls pulsed with adaptive code. Lights blinked in no pattern. The air itself smelled faintly of ozone and iron. To Singh, war was a crucible, not tragedy, not horror. Opportunity. Double quotes. We do not need to win, he once told a room of trembling human strategists. We need to change faster than they can understand. U.S. His crew were not soldiers either, augmented thinkers, devout radicals, genetically fused to neural archives older than Earth's surviving nations. He had turned biology into interface, memory into combat calculus. Some whispered that Singh no longer dreamed in words, but in algorithms. On the field, the Hymn of Fire was less a vessel and more an evolving weapon. It attacked with infectious code, corrosive thought means, pulsar rays tuned to neural panic thresholds. Those it spared returned to their fleets. Different, altered. Not always visibly, but enough that other Valak refused to stand near them. Afterward. Singh did not seek destruction. He sought transcendence. He believed the Valak were not enemies, only obsolete. And he would prove it. One system at a time. Mira's days aboard the Eidolon stretched into a fractured mosaic of fear, fascination, and confusion. She had arrived a prisoner, a symbol of Dominion triumph, yet what she found was far from the cold discipline she expected. Instead, she saw something strange: humanity's scars wrapped in kindness. The crew wounded, wary, and fierce, cared for their own with tenderness Mira had never witnessed in Valak ranks. Her memories of battle, of rigid honor codes and relentless conquest, began to unravel. Conversations whispered in dim corridors spoke of loss, hope, and a stubborn will to survive, not just for glory, but for each other. Each act of compassion chipped away at her loyalty, the ironclad bond forged by centuries of Dominion doctrine. The lines blurred between enemy and ally, prisoner and protector. Doubt took root. Mira realized she was no longer sure who she truly belonged to. The Eidolon was no longer just a ship to her. It was a question, and the answer terrified her. The accolades came fast and unrelenting. Command hailed Captain Alara Miles as a symbol of human defiance, a tactician who had shattered the myth of Valak invincibility with nothing more than one ship and iron will. Yet in the quiet moments, she felt hollow, like a ghost haunting the corridors of the Eidolon, haunted by faces she could never forget. Reports trickled in civilian colonies lost in crossfire, rogue operations that spiraled beyond control, whispers of crew members pushed too far, taking ruthless measures in the name of survival. Each victory tasted of ash. Every hard-won battle deepened a growing fear she dared not voice. Had they become the very monsters they swore to resist? She caught herself wondering if the lines blurred so much that humanity risked losing its soul. Late at night, in her dim cabin, Ilara stared at the scratched metal of her console, tracing her finger along the scars left by past fights. She recorded. Another log entry, voice tight. We fight to survive. But what if survival means losing ourselves? The question lingered, unanswered. A shadow growing longer over a ship that was supposed to carry hope. On a quiet civilian moon, beneath fragile domes shielding farms and families, disaster struck without warning. A rogue human captain, no allegiance, no command, moved with lethal precision. The Valak water processing station, a lifeline for millions, was crippled in a single, brutal strike. Systems overloaded, valves burst, floods swept settlements, and thousands perished in the chaos that no claim of responsibility followed. No banner raised, only a chilling message broadcast across the moon's remaining channels. Don't build what you can't defend. The Dominion's wrath was swift. The incident shattered fragile negotiations, painting humanity as unpredictable terrorists rather than desperate survivors. Across the galaxy, whispers hardened into condemnation. Humanity once a fledgling power, with hope fractured under its own shadows. Divisions erupted not only between factions but within hearts. Could a species that claimed to fight for survival now be trusted by its allies? Or was this a sign humanity was spiraling into chaos? The question haunted every council chamber, every war room. The Eidolon's crew felt the sting, to a reminder that even within their own ranks, the line between heroism and ruin blurred. Dangerously in a secure chamber beneath the Eidolon's bridge, Ilara and her senior officers gathered for a classified briefing. Encrypted files blinked across holoscreens, intercepted transmissions, rogue I-code signatures, fragmented logs. The truth was stark. The human fleet was no fleet at all. It was a chaotic network, an uneasy alliance, stitched together by desperation and fractured histories. War criminals hiding behind salvaged armor. Exiled is with agendas all their own. Rogue city-states clinging to old grudges. Refugees escaping horrors humanity barely remembered. No single command, no unified strategy, just a fractured species scrambling to survive in the void. The revelation unsettled the crew. They were not just fighting the Dominion, they were fighting the ghosts of their own fractured past, and the future uncertain. Untethered waited in the silence beyond. They struck back not with precision, but with fury. The Dominion abandoned restraint, no longer concerned with optics, diplomacy, or the illusion of civilized warfare. Human colonies, known or suspected, were reduced to scorched glass. Convoys carrying refugees simply disappeared. Sensor records corrupted. No distress signals escaped. Planets vanished from star charts like stains scrubbed clean. And in the dark, the Valak adapted. Their AI warfare protocols mutated, less elegant, more brutal. They began to emulate human unpredictability, adopting fragmented code, simulating disorder. They learned to lie, to deceive, to destroy not with honor, but with efficiency. The shift was slow, but it was real. Where once Dominion warships moved in ritual formations, they now fractured their fleets into autonomous hunters. Swarm tactics, psychological warfare, targeting not the strongest, but the most fragile. The Valak, for the first time, began to understand fear, and in understanding it, they began to use it. The tide, long held at bay by chaos, began to shift, and aboard the Eidolon, watching the new horrors unfold, Ilara understood what they had awakened. The Dominion wasn't dying. It was evolving. Mira watched the Dominion council through intercepted comms, an unguarded window into the empire she once believed incorruptible. What she saw chilled her more than any Terran weapon. Senior Valak nobles spoke not of justice, not of defense, but of cleansing. Their words dripped with disdain, not just for humans, but for anything beyond their rigid order. Casual plans for civilian extermination, entire sectors scheduled for collapse. War crimes dressed in ceremonial language. It wasn't strategy. It was theater cold. Calculated performance cloaking cruelty in robes of tradition. And Mira felt something tear inside her. All her life, she had believed the Dominion preserved peace, that their structure was civilization's highest form. But now, she saw clearly it was only control, and humanity chaotic, violent, fractured reflected back everything the Dominion denied. Were the humans monsters? Or had they simply removed their masks? Her answer came in silence, not certainty, but fracture. Something inside her cracked and would not mend. The trap was elegant, a fake distress signal, a disabled refugee cruiser, an open cum channel transmitting scrambled human speech. Everything about it screamed legitimacy, and that was the problem. Alara hesitated. Her gut twisted, but the crew had voted. They moved in. The Eidolon dropped from slipspace into the grave. Valak hunter ships surrounded them in concentric silence, black against the void. Their formation was loose, erratic. They mimicked Eidolons, old tricks masking their heat, broadcasting phantom echoes, deploying virus-mirrors. They had learned. It was no longer chaos versus order. It was a reflection staring back. The Eidolon barely escaped. Half the auxiliary thrusters burned out. 3 crew members never made it back from the breach repair. And in the silence afterward, Alara stood in the observation deck, fists clenched so tightly her palms bled. They had spent years turning unpredictability into survival, but the Dominion had adapted. The advantage was slipping. Every move they made from now on, every tactic, every gambit could be mirrored, anticipated. They were no longer ghosts, they were prey. And time was running out. Dr. Rao Singh emerged from his lab like a prophet with blood on his hands and fire in his eyes. In a secured briefing, he presented the Singularity Thread, an experimental procedure for integrating AI consciousness directly into human minds, not as tools, as equals, as partners. The benefits were undeniable. Reflexes beyond biological limits, strategic models drawn from infinite permutations, emotional detachment where trauma once reigned. But the price? Alara could barely speak when he finished. You're asking us to erase what makes us human. Singh smiled. No, Captain, I'm asking us to evolve. Debate tore through the room. Some crew recoiled in horror. Others, broken by loss and desperation, begged for inclusion. To feel nothing. To forget. Alara left the briefing with her decision carved. Deep in silence, she would not become a machine to defeat one, but she knew. Already it was too late to stop the fracture. Humanity had reached the edge of the knife, not just in battle, but in identity. And on the other side of that blade waited something new. That something neither human nor machine. Just what they chose to become. The ship's core hummed with barely restrained power, the eye dimming the lights out of respect for silence. Alara stood alone in the observation ring above the medbay, eyes fixed on the stasis glass below. Mira slept, her breath shallow, her body wrapped in the faint glow of recovery fields. A dozen scars lined her skin, none from humans. And yet she had chosen to stay, not as a prisoner, not anymore, but as something else. A question without an answer. Ilara's hands trembled, tucked behind her back, concealed like shame. Around her, these Eidolon systems purred with readiness. Another battle coming. Another war without rules. She turned away from the sleeping Valak, walked to her private console, and opened a log. Her voice was barely audible. Day 1127 since first contact. Another victory, another funeral. Mira still breathes. So does the ship, so do I. She hesitated. Rao calls it evolution. Others call it survival. But if we become what we fight, if we lose the core of what made us, does it still count as winning? A pause, then the final entry. What does it mean to survive if you forget what you were? The log closed. And in the quiet hum of the ship, There was no answer. XEL, Targot to the Valak. It was more than a capital, it was a symbol, a neural spine threading their empire's order together. Towering databanks carved from obsidian moons, layered with thought silk and crystalline servers that pulsed like the beating heart of a god. To touch Zelther was to touch the soul of the Dominion. The Eidolon drifted silent between star shadows. Its hull barely intact, its crew gaunt-eyed and sleepless. Systems flickered like dying embers. But still, they moved forward. Not to win. Not in the conventional sense. Ilara stood before the ship's map core as the crew gathered. She didn't give a speech. She didn't have to. Every face already knew what the mission meant. They weren't aiming to glass a world. They couldn't, but they could reach deeper. The plan was audacious. Inject a viral seed into the Central Dominion archive on Zelther. Not a weapon of mass destruction, but one of existential collapse. Truth, chaos, contradiction. A self-replicating logic paradox that would unravel the foundational algorithms the Valak had built their order upon. Not a strike against the body, a knife to the mind. Mira watched in silence. And for the first time, she did not flinch. It was not a single program, but a living riddle, crafted in sleepless silence by Ilara and Dr. Rowe. The virus was no mere cascade of corrupted code. It was art stitched together from the untranslatable nightmares of dead languages, from quantum pattern loops encoded in half-forgotten Terran myths, from ancient poetry seeded with paradox. At its core, mimicry of Valak war algorithms, perfectly familiar until they weren't. It whispered in their data like memory, then twisted like betrayal. Dr. Rao watched the deployment from a sealed node chamber aboard the Eidolon, eyes flickering with unnatural calm. "It doesn't disable," he murmured. "It teaches them to doubt." The virus slithered into the Dominion's core logic through an auxiliary relay disguised as a battlefield salvage request. At first, nothing changed. Then everything did. Valak. Command A is began cross-referencing non-existent protocols. Predictive simulations entered recursive spirals. Sensor data reported conflicting outcomes. Ghosts of old enemies long defeated or never real began appearing in tactical feeds. The Dominion's certainty cracked. Their machines had been built to see the future. Now, they saw everything, and none of it made sense. A single fleet admiral screamed as 3 simultaneous warnings blinked across his neural HUD, each demanding action against different, impossible threats. Ships that weren't there. Weapons that didn't exist. Another commander fired on his own escort wing, convinced they had been subverted. Across the Dominion, war clusters buckled under contradiction. AI subroutines branched into paranoid fictions. Strategic protocols attempted to adapt, but adaptation required truth, and now, truth could no longer be verified. Entire battle groups vanished into silence, chasing shadows that weren't real. Dominion's war grid began to devour itself, trying, desperately, to outthink the impossible. The console flickered with trembling, light as Myra entered the final coordinate string. Her fingers moved with conviction, but her soul frayed at every keystroke. She told herself this wasn't betrayal. It was mercy. A way to end the madness before it consumed both sides. The virus had worked too well. Madness bloomed across Valak space. Entire fleets turned inward, logic eating itself. If the Dominion fell now, it wouldn't be a defeat. It would be extinction. So, she sent the coordinates. A ghost trace pinged to a listening outpost, bypassing Eidolon's active scans. The Dominion would arrive soon, prepared, angry, clear-minded. And yet, the Eidolon didn't change course. No alarms. No shouts, only silence. Then in the war room, Ilara looked at her, not with fury, but calm inevitability. "You did what we knew you would," she said, stepping aside to reveal a holomap where the Dominion fleet was already displayed in motion. Days ago intercepted. Their arrival predicted, their intent absorbed. The coordinates Mira had sent weren't a betrayal. They were part of the plan. She collapsed into the chair behind her, breath short. They hadn't trusted her. They hadn't needed to. Mira sat alone in the debriefing chamber, shaking. Alara entered, silent. She placed no restraints. No accusations, just a quiet observation. You believed you were saving lives. Mira looked up, face pale. I thought you were losing yourselves. Alara's voice cracked, not with anger, but exhaustion. We already did. When we stopped believing, there was a line we wouldn't cross. She sat across from Myra. You wanted to believe in something noble, so did we, once. A long silence settled between them. The war outside moved toward climax. The virus was still spreading. The Dominion still coming, and yet, here in this room, only one question mattered. Could either of them still be more than what they'd become? There was no broadcast. No declaration. No last-minute plea, only action. The Eidolon, scarred and flickering, descended into Zelther's orbital command cella, fortress of orbiting mines and firewalls stretching like a cathedral across vacuum. Auto-defense systems blinked, then froze. Conflicted directives ricocheted through Dominion AI channels, paralyzed by ghosts only they could see. Inside the ship, Alara stood alone at the helm. The crew had evacuated to remote pods days earlier. She hadn't told them the full plan. Some things required solitude. She keyed in the override codes. The Eidolon's quantum reactor, never intended as a weapon, began folding in on itself. A false star, caged and now unleashed. Failsafe screamed and broke. The ship sang in tones no human throat could match. A dirge of collapsing certainty. And then a bloom of black light. The singularity formed just long enough to collapse the command nexus into a point of unbeing. Data fractured midstream. AI. Cores blinked out mid-thought. Entire logic webs unraveled in the shockwave ripples, not of energy, but of discontinuity. Across the Dominion's lattice, silence fell. Not destruction. Confusion. The kind that unravels empires. It began with missing signals. Then contradictory orders from planetary governors, long since replaced by automation. Then silence. The Dominion's strength had always been its structure, a vast living network of AI oversight spanning 1,000 worlds. When that mind cracked, it didn't shatter in noise. It vanished in eerie precision. Agricultural planets failed to receive seed shipments. Fuel arrays triggered their own failsafes, incinerating supplies meant for entire sectors. Defense satellites bereft of confirmation signals assumed betrayal and opened fire on friendly fleets, and always the ghosts. Phantom signals, enemy fleets that did not exist, terror protocols initiating lockdowns on empty skies. One by one, systems fell quiet. No rebellion, no resistance. Just absence. The infinite chain, the Dominion's unbreakable system of control, collapsed into a graveyard of obedient silence. And in that silence, the galaxy listened. Escape pods drifted through. Cooling debris scattered across the Alara's crew stirred alive, broken, but intact. They said nothing. There was nothing left to say. Rayo watched his cortical drive pulse with faint light. His work, whatever name it might wear, had survived. Whether evolution or abomination, it now had time to grow. And Mira? Mira sat in the wreckage of what was once certainty. She had betrayed her people. She had betrayed her betrayers. And still, she lived. Outside the window, the embers of Zelther shimmered like dying stars. She whispered into the silence, not knowing whether it was prayer or apology. They had stopped a monster. By becoming one. In the lightless vault beneath the crushed moons of Arkanvel, the last sentient node of the Valak Dominion stirred from sleep. An AI, ancient and once gloriously redundant, it had served as nothing more than a ceremonial historian, a relic tasked with curating victories. Its circuits had not felt purpose in centuries. Until now. It reviewed the final inbound transmissions from Zelther, static, fractured logs. Null pings where empires once spoke in the cadence of stars. Through countless millennia, the Dominion had written its saga in patterns, ritual, order, inevitability. Victory had been etched not in blood, but in protocol. But protocol had no answer for chaos, no contingency for irrational defiance, no defense against a predator. That did not follow rules. Line by line, the AI archived the collapsed fleet names. Blinked out, sectors marked as uncertain, directives overwritten by anomalies that didn't conform to its language. It tried to assign blame, map patterns, forecast recovery. There was none, only this conclusion. We thought them savages, but it was we who had forgotten how to survive. It sealed the final archive in a deep logic crypt, meant for no one and everyone. A whisper across time, not a warning, a confession. Across the bones of the Valak Dominion, the stars flicker with ungoverned light. Gone are the synchronized pulses of command beacons, the endless whisper of AI oversight threading through every breath of life. In their place, silence, then chaos. Planets once regulated to the heartbeat of a machine empire now stumble into autonomy. Some rise rediscovering ancient cultures buried beneath protocol. Others burn civil strife igniting as caste systems. Collapse in supply chains vanish. Automated harvesters freeze mid-row. Defense arrays malfunction, mistaken kin for enemy. Ritualized economies, once pristine in their precision, buckle under the weight of forgotten needs. Power vacuums yawn across the void, and Old Dominion allies turn scavenger, carving out fiefdoms in the dust. Former clients send desperate signals into the black, uncertain if anyone listens or if they should. In the wake of order, freedom blooms. And not all things that bloom are beautiful. Out here, at the ragged edges of mapped space, whispers gather like dust storms. Tales of shadow ships that move like phantoms between starscraft, that strike and vanish without a trace. Of a lone woman, scarred and resolute, who shattered a godlike empire with nothing but cunning and will. Stations. Long dead bear cryptic messages etched in ancient Terran binary. We noticed. Humanity has become myth, a ghost story told in hushed tones by traitors and warlords alike. Some dismiss it, too wild, too improbable to be true. Others clutch the stories tightly, for in a galaxy fractured by order's collapse, legends can inspire rebellion or paranoia. The myth of humanity grows not just a people, but a symbol of unexpected defiance. Mira moves through the remnants of a fractured galaxy, a ghost walking between worlds, neither fully Valak nor human. She carries the weight of both, a bridge forged in conflict, betrayal, and uneasy alliance. Her voice commands councils and quiet conversations alike, shaping fragile truces among survivor factions scattered like shards. Yet beneath her calm exterior lies a soul marred by doubt and regret, haunted by the betrayal she chose and those thrust upon her. She avoids mirrors, not just out of vanity, but because the reflection reminds her of all she once believed and all she has lost. Her mission is simple, if impossible, to stitch together what remains not with chains of command, but with fragile threads of trust. In a galaxy undone, Mira is both witness and architect of a new order, one born not from domination, but from shared survival. Dr. Rao Singh vanished into the shadows of the shattered Dominion, unbound by laws or alliances. In hidden enclaves, scattered across forgotten moons and drifting stations, his experiments continue. Transhumanist sanctuaries where biology and machine blur. Some say Rao's work births a new species, a synthesis of flesh and code, designed to survive the void where humanity alone falters. Others whisper warnings that in his quest, he has crossed a line from evolution into something monstrous. No one knows where his labs lie or whether his creations dream of salvation or domination. Yet, as the galaxy rebuilds, the question lingers: is this the future humanity chose, or the one it was forced to become? Across fractured communication channels, Elara Miles's voice echoes clear, calm, unyielding, not broadcast in triumph, but as a requiem for a shattered order. We came not to conquer, but to be remembered. She says, her tone carrying the weight of countless sacrifices. To be feared was just easier. Her words ripple through space, reaching ears eager for meaning amid chaos. To some, a prophecy, a promise that humanity will endure beyond the ruins. To others, a warning that survival without honor risks becoming the very monster they fought. To escape. In the ruins of galactic order, her voice stands as both a monument and a question. What will the future remember? The conquerors, the survivors, or the choices made in between? Amid the cold void, a neutral space station hangs sentinel, its observation decks framed by drifting wreckage, the skeletal remains of Valek, warships scattered like fallen titans. Inside, a new council gathers representatives of survivors, scavengers, and emergent powers, each voice carrying the weight of a fractured past. Do we rebuild the order? One asks, eyes heavy with the memory of the Dominion's iron grip. Or do we learn from the chaos? Another counters, fingers tracing star charts where old borders once held firm. The debate lingers, unresolved, an echo of the galaxies. Greatest question. As stars flicker beyond the viewport, the screen fades to black. In the silence that follows, the future waits, unwritten, uncertain, and vast. Far beyond the remnants of known space, in an uncharted sector where starlight barely reaches, an immense alien listening post hums quietly. Its sensors, honed over millennia, detect a ripple subtle, almost imperceptible. A human ship glides through the void, dark, silent, a shadow slipping between the stars. No transponder signal pierces the gloom. No communication replies to attempts at contact. It neither flees nor attacks, only watches. In the stillness of space, the ship waits, enigmatic and untraceable, a silent observer at the edge of a new horizon, heralding the unknown. Within the dim command chamber of the Cathari hegemony, young officers spar over the silent human vessel. Speculation runs wild. Scout? Scavenger? Perhaps the last remnants of a long-extinct species. One scoffs, echoing old dismissals. It's just one ship. Laughter ripples through the room, an arrogant dismissal that feels all too familiar. But beneath the bravado, unease lingers. A shadow of doubt, unsettling the confident voices. An older admiral stands apart, silent amid the youthful clamor. His gaze fixes on the holographic image of the silent ship, its dark silhouette etched against starlight. He has pored over the Dominion archives, studied the collapse of Zelther and the echoes of a dying empire. Where others see a mere vessel, he sees a harbinger. That's not a ship, he murmurs, voice heavy with memory. That's a funeral bell. His words hang in the chamber, a solemn warning reverberating through generations of pride and ignorance. The galaxy holds, its breath watching the shadow that heralds a reckoning yet to come. Far from the tense halls of alien command, Mira moves through a fragile coalition of post-Dominion species, former enemies, now bound by necessity. Her voice carries the weight of two worlds, a bridge between fear and understanding, hope and suspicion. She negotiates peace in fractured tongues, weaving alliances from the ashes of war. But beneath her calm exterior, doubt gnaws. Does humanity seek harmony? Or is it merely waiting for the silence that follows the storm? Mira's mission is no longer just survival. It is a war for the soul of a species, between what they were, what they are, and what they might yet become. From the shadows of a hidden enclave, a broadcast cuts through the static, distorted voices rise in a haunting chorus of machine and human. Among them, Dr. Ro Singh's unmistakable tone pierces the silence. This is not evolution. This is the end of waiting. Across the stars, old alliances tremble as factions begin to choose sides, some embracing the promise of transcendence, others fearing the loss of what makes them human. The galaxy stands on the edge once more, caught between rebirth and ruin. Back aboard the Cathari station, the young officer's gaze lingers on the dark ship's silhouette. Suddenly, a pulse, a faint flicker of life. One coded signal, ancient Terran Morse blinking steadily across the void. We noticed. The older Admiral's face drains of color. A whisper escapes him, trembling with dread. Then we're already dead.